Hello, and welcome to a special mashup episode of NSI's two innovative podcasts, Fault Lines and Control F, recorded live from the Reagan National Defense Forum. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and I'm joined by NSI Advisory Board Member Lester Munson, and our special guest, Senator Kevin Cramer, representing the great state of North Dakota. Senator Cramer was elected to the United States Senate in 2018 after serving 3 terms in the House of Representatives. He serves on the Armed Services, Environment and Public Works, Veterans Affairs, Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs committees, and recently became the vice chair, or co-chair, I should say, of the Senate's Defense Modernization Caucus. Senator, welcome.
Great to be with you. Thank you. And that Defense Modernization Caucus is something Mark Kelly and I stood up. As far as I know, we're still the only 2 members, but so we assume leadership.
No, I understand that the membership is growing, growing much to your credit. Yeah. So you, as you mentioned, you and Senator Kelly, lead the Defense Modernization Caucus. This is a bipartisan, bicameral group focusing on strengthening national security by integrating and adopting emergent technologies and ensuring the U.S. military is equipped with the most advanced tools and strategies to counter rising threats. What was the motivating force behind this? Really, what spurred you to action?
So it's so interesting, Morgan, because being here at the Reagan National Defense Forum, I feel very validated because what's been talked about in about every third sentence by everybody is how we have to move at the speed of relevance, which is the way Lloyd Austin put it. I often say we need to move at the speed of China. And one of the things that's often held us back, of course, is not so much, it's certainly not innovators. We have the best innovators, always have had. I mean, it's always been the American edge, but rather the processes that have sort of built up over the course of years and decades and centuries probably, that have added a lot of burden to moving quickly. Now, that used to work when you weren't talking about technologies whose generations, change about every month or two, and the private sector and the innovators and the entrepreneurs get to the point of such frustration that they just get out of the defense industry business. And so, you read the description of the caucus and our what our goals are. But I think what motivates us is just that our adversaries are moving so much quicker than we are. And what that means to me is that not only are we not moving quickly, we're leaving a lot of innovators behind because they just don't have the patience or the capital or the stamina it takes to turn what they could do in 6 months, turn it into 6 years. So I think one of the targets, and Mark and I, Senator Kelly and I have talked about it this week, and as we are here in Simi Valley, about maybe the very first caucus event that we do needs to be not so much about technologies and emerging technologies, but rather about the process, whether it's the process of R&D, whether it's the process of procurement or acquisitions. We're hearing a lot about that, and I think that's where we start.
Right. No, so that sort of gets into my next question. Can you talk a little bit more about the priorities? I mean, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Right.
And, there seems to be an exhaustive supply of demand these days.
Yeah. I think the priority is that. I think it is the process. It's the bureaucracy itself. And that's some of that's legislative. Some of it's the rules, the manuals. Some of it's the lawyers. A lot of it's the lawyers. But some of it's the Congress itself, the legislatures, and the legislative process, and some of it's politics, quite honestly. So, where you have a bureaucracy that just naturally sort of exists to protect itself, that just happens over time, we can't afford that. But at the same time, when you have a Congress that oftentimes looks for the next opportunity to get you, if you're a secretary or an undersecretary, maybe less so a general or something, or commander, but so in the terms of politics, we're often looking for the gotcha moment. I say we, I do not. In fact, the one thing I tell everybody that comes in front of the committee, especially if I get them in my office beforehand, and the people that I always want to talk to before going to a hearing are, of course, chiefs, people that are up to be a chief, and people that are up to be a secretary, maybe even an undersecretary, but also everybody or anybody that has anything to do with acquisition, anybody has something to do with acquisition, procurement, or R&D. And the reason I do that is two things. One, I want to test their tolerance for risk, and then see how they plan to apply it in this government role, and then to assure them that if they take appropriate risk with new innovation or technologies and they fail, I promise not only will I not be the one on the dais that chews you out for being dumb, I'll be the one that backs you up for taking a chance. And so a lot of it's cultural. It's not yes, it's rules, it's legislation, it's processes, it's systems, but it's also cultural. And that's cultural within the agencies and within the Department of Defense and the various services, and it's within the Congress itself.
Senator, I love the fact that the caucus is bipartisan, and you and Senator Kelly seem like a terrific tandem to work on these things. My sense of defense modernization is that there's been a lot of progress recently, and credit to everyone involved on both parties, the current administration,
yes,
previous administration. But as you look forward to next year, we do have a new administration coming in, kind of what's old is new, a little bit,
right? Yeah,
perhaps,
for sure.
But
yeah.
A new group of folks coming in. And I don't mean this to sound political at all, I don't mean it that way, but what are the opportunities that you're looking for the new administration to really hit hard? What are like the 2 or 3 things where you think they can make an even greater difference right away?
So I actually think it's the culture side of it. First thing, starting over or starting new is always a fresh opportunity. We already hear a lot about, DOGE, as an example. I mean, perhaps the greatest innovator in the history of the world, helping lead that effort in Elon Musk, who understands how it works in the private sector, not just the private sector, but in a true, personal private situation. In other words, he doesn't have a bunch of shareholders in his major parts of his company, and so I think he helps bring that new culture, if you will. But you also have a bit of a kick down the doors attitude that comes with a second Trump term, swagger, if you will. They know they only have 4 years. It's not just a second term. It's like a first and second term, and urgency is innate. And I think urgency sort of helps with the innovation side. They know they don't have a long time to both change things and to set a legacy in place. So I sense that. Now, as we record this, we're in the Pete Hegseth mode where we're waiting to see how it's going to turn out. We're members of the committee have been interviewing him, as you know. I've talked to him on the phone as well as interviewing him. One of the most encouraging things I take from Pete is not just this attitude, but a pretty clear understanding that Silicon Valley might have the solutions that we're seeking, in Virginia, and that we need to find a way to unleash the innovators and to not just get out of their way, but to incentivize the innovators. And so that's encouraging to me. I'm encouraged by this weekend. Like, as I said up front, I mean, it's almost like Mark Kelly and I planned it, and whether it's Palantir or Anduril or, even the bigs, I think one of the things we often talk about when we're talking about entrepreneurship and innovation is we think about the new guy versus the big guy. I would submit to you that there's plenty of innovation capability among the largest legacy companies that serve us, but their bureaucracy mirrors the Department of Defense's bureaucracy, and I just sense an attitude change, and it's driven by need. It's driven by the demand that's being created by enemies who aren't burdened by this clumsy bureaucracy that we have.
Let me ask a follow-up question
Yes.
on this kind of urgency question with the incoming administration. President Trump will be a lame duck when he takes office, and there are implications for that. Perhaps they're not the same ones will apply to him. That's certainly possible. What's your sense of the enthusiasm in Congress in both parties to adopt some of these changes that he's hopefully going to be pushing?
Yeah, so great question, because one might think, given it particularly how, what a rough and tumble time he's had, he being President Trump through his career, but I actually think there's something rather liberating about a second Trump term, particularly in the fact that he won the popular vote. So that I think Democrats recognize we didn't do it right. We're probably not that they're going to necessarily take blame, but I do sense that there's an introspect going on among our Democratic friends, and none of them want to be unsuccessful either. So I think as long as, there are going to be things we disagree on, but I think in this area of peace through strength, of deterrence, and at a time when we have a $34 trillion debt and we can't do everything, therefore we need to prioritize, and we need to find ways to do a lot more things with fewer resources. Obviously AI is like issues 1, 2, and 3 out of the top 5 probably, and the opportunity to do things faster, cheaper, realizing that the military, like the industrial capacity we have, is short of humans. I mean, we have a workforce challenge. We talk about supply chain challenges. I think that one of the biggest supply chain challenges we have is workforce. So I just sense that there are a lot of people pulling the same direction here. And again, there may be, and there certainly will be, some differences here and there, but I don't know anybody that doesn't want to do more faster than we've been doing it.
Mm-hmm. So next Congress, you are expected to chair the subcommittee handling U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. What do you want to accomplish by overseeing the Navy?
Yeah, wow. So doesn't it make perfect sense? I'm from the center of the North American continent. I mean, we have a monument.
I was going to note that detail.
we have a monument to prove it. It's the center of the North American continent, Rugby, North Dakota. Actually, my main interest in the Navy as a chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee, if that's how it turns out, is it's the same as it is with all the services. For one thing, for the services to be more interoperable. I think that gets to the modernization effort. Far too long we've had services in silos. Now, that's starting to change, but I think we need to accelerate that change. If we're going to have a war in the Indo-Pacific, it is going to require all hands on deck, and I'm not just talking about ships. I mean, it's under the sea, on the sea, above the sea, in space, on the land. We have to be able to identify the threats, target the threats, send the messages as quickly as possible to the weapon systems that will mitigate the risks. So to me, it's all the above. It's not just more ships. I will say this, though. I think we oftentimes neglect, when we're talking about modernization, when we're talking about unmanned systems, we often neglect talking about the Navy. And the reality is that particularly under the water and on top, if the force multiplier is AI and autonomous systems, that we can do very fast and we can catch up very quickly, if not pass our number one adversary, obviously in the Pacific, China.
Senator, we've seen a couple of hot wars recently, Syria, I'm thinking of, and also Ukraine, where battlefield tactics have advanced very quickly.
Yes.
What is your sense of seeing how that plays out on the ground between the Ukrainians and the Russians, and how some of these Syrian rebel groups have really advanced so much more quickly than anyone thought possible?
Yep.
Are we going fast enough in our modernization? Are we going to be able to be in that space? Should things go the wrong way and our guys have to go into harm's way again? Are we ready?
We're not ready today, but we are moving fast that direction. We're moving very quickly in the direction to both combat, to counter this kind of UAS attack that's coming on, the swarms. And let's face it, some of it's over our own, in our own CONUS and on our own continent. Swarms over Langley, for crying out loud. And in the United States, we have the additional challenge of other bureaucracies, the FAA and the complications of all of that, and of even jamming and non-kinetic responses can have negative impact on commercial, air traffic and private, air traffic and things like that. Over in Europe or in other places in the Middle East, Syria, we have a little more liberty with how to deal with it. But shooting down $2,000 drones with $1 million missiles doesn't make a lot of sense. So I would say this, just in the last 1 year, and I say 1 year because it was December of last year that a North Dakotan native, his parents still live there, I know him well, know his parents, was taken down in his Black Hawk helicopter. He flew out of Erbil by one of these small drones. And he had called his wife on Thanksgiving Day and said that one of them got within a rotor length, and on Christmas Day, one got him. And he's recovering, but when you think that can happen to the strongest, most sophisticated, advanced country in the world, it shows you that it's not a lack of brain power, it's not a lack of technology and innovation. It's a lack, I think, of will to do what needs to be done. But that's changed. In a year already, all of the services have come up with various solutions. But what I worry about is that you have the Army doing a number of things, and you have the Air Force doing some other things over here, and you have the Navy doing some things. I think it's an all hands on deck, get everybody pulling in the same direction, or creating, more importantly, a competitive process. This is an area where the innovator may very well be somebody in their garage. If you provided the right incentive to come up with a solution for this problem, I think they're out there, but we're not moving nearly fast enough. But that's what a lot of this weekend's forum has been about. And I want to be able to be helpful to do that. That's, again, back to the caucus. It's to look at all of the potential barriers to unleashing with great speed and urgency the innovation to deal with this crisis.
Yeah, we just got to get out of our own way.
We sure do. Man, that's well said.
Excellent. Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us today. This is a wrap. Thanks so much to Devlin Burning, Keelan Wolf, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Both Fault Lines and Control F are now on YouTube, so check out our channel for a video of today's episode. If you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.